How did a small, persecuted movement from a forgotten corner of the Roman Empire become the dominant faith of the Western world? It's a question that shocks history. How did Christianity spread across the Roman Empire without armies, without wealth, without political power, and without social media? Think about it. There was no government backing, no advertising budget, no legal protection. For centuries, being a Christian could get you killed. Yet within 300 years, this faith transformed the most powerful empire the world had ever seen. Today on Phistis Gospel, we are not telling church legends, we're examining history. We're digging into the data, the accounts, and the surprising facts that historians, both Christian and non-Christian, acknowledge. This is the untold story of how Christianity conquered the world from the bottom up. First, we have to understand the world Christianity entered. First-century Roman society was brutal. It was a world of stark contrasts between the powerful and the powerless. Slavery was not just common, it was the engine of the Roman economy. Infanticide, the practice of leaving unwanted infants to die, was legal and widely practiced. Women, especially outside the elite classes, had few rights and little public voice. The poor were seen as disposable, a problem to be managed, not a people to be cherished. Religion in this world was almost entirely transactional. You worshiped the gods for favor, for a good harvest, for victory in battle, or for personal health. It was about what the gods could do for you, not about moral transformation or a personal relationship. Into this harsh, transactional world came the story of a crucified Jewish teacher, a man executed by the Roman state as a common criminal. From a purely human perspective, Christianity should have died in 30 AD, right there with its founder on a cross outside Jerusalem. Its leader was dead, its followers were a handful of frightened, scattered nobodies. Instead, against all odds, it grew. The spread of Christianity did not begin with a set of new ethics or a social program. It began with a single, explosive claim: Jesus Christ has risen from the dead. This wasn't a private belief whispered in secret. It was proclaimed publicly, just weeks after the crucifixion, in the very city of Jerusalem where the tomb could be checked. Think about the sheer audacity of this. If the body of Jesus still existed in that tomb, the movement would have ended immediately. Roman authorities or Jewish leaders could have produced the body and exposed the whole thing as a fraud. Instead, something incredible happened. The historical record shows the tomb was empty. The disciples, who had been hiding in fear, suddenly began preaching openly in the streets, risking their lives to do so. And within weeks, thousands of people in Jerusalem joined them. The resurrection message was the ignition point. It was the engine of growth that propelled this fledgling movement out of Judea and across the world. It wasn't just a philosophy, it was an event that they claimed changed reality itself. So, who spread this world-changing message? Not emperors, not senators, not philosophers. Christianity did not spread through the elites. It spread through the most ordinary people imaginable. It was a grassroots movement in the truest sense of the word. It spread through the mouths of fishermen who left their nets to follow a new master. It was shared by slaves who found a dignity in Christ that their masters denied them. It was nurtured by women who often hosted the first churches in their homes. It was carried along trade routes by merchants and artisans, and it was even preached by prisoners in chains. The Apostle Paul, a former persecutor of the church, became its greatest missionary. He strategically used the incredible infrastructure of the Roman Empire against itself. He traveled Roman roads, sailed on Roman ships, and used the common Greek language to carry the message to major urban centers across the Mediterranean. These early Christians didn't have cathedrals or church buildings. They met in the living rooms of private homes, in the back of workshops, and sometimes in underground catacombs. There were no microphones, no professional clergy in the modern sense, no slick marketing campaigns. There were just lives transformed by an encounter with the risen Christ, sharing that transformation with their neighbors. As this new faith spread, Rome began to notice, and it saw Christianity as a dangerous threat. Why? Why would the most powerful empire in the world be so concerned with a small, pacifist religion? The reasons were deeply political and social. Christians refused to participate in emperor worship, which was a fundamental display of loyalty to the state. They rejected the pagan sacrifices that were woven into the fabric of public life, from military ceremonies to civic festivals. Most provocatively, they called Jesus Lord, a political title reserved for Caesar. For Rome, this was not just a religious difference. It was an act of treason, and so, persecution followed. It came in waves, sometimes local, sometimes empire-wide. Christians faced arrests, the confiscation of their property, and brutal executions. They were burned as torches, thrown to wild beasts in the Colosseum, and crucified as a public spectacle. Yet, historians record a shocking and counterintuitive outcome. The persecution did not stop the church, it multiplied it. The early Christian writer Tertullian famously wrote, "The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church." He was right. Seeing Christians face death with courage, forgiveness, and even joy made a profound impact on Roman society. It demonstrated a conviction that was deeper than the fear of death. Martyrdom made Christianity visible, not weak. It forced people to ask, what could possibly inspire such devotion? But it wasn't just how Christians died that drew people in, it was how they lived. During the devastating plagues that periodically swept through the Roman Empire, the typical response of pagans, including doctors and priests, was to flee the cities to save themselves. Christians, however, stayed. They did the unthinkable. They cared for the sick, both their own and their pagan neighbors. They buried the dead, offering dignity to those who had been abandoned. They adopted the unwanted children left to die on city dumps. They fed the poor, creating networks of charity that were unheard of in the ancient world. This wasn't a secret. It was so noticeable that the Roman Emperor Julian, a man who tried to revive paganism in the 4th century, complained about it in a letter. He wrote, "These impious Galileans support not only their own poor, but ours as well. Even their enemies had to acknowledge their radical love." Christianity spread because this kind of practical, selfless love was contagious. In a society built on a rigid hierarchy, Christianity offered a revolutionary sense of dignity to those who had none. Think of who was at the bottom of the Roman social ladder. Women, slaves, and the poor found a hope and value in the church that society completely denied them. Within the Christian community, women were not property, but were honored as co-laborers and leaders. Slaves were not tools, but were embraced as spiritual equals, brothers and sisters in Christ. The poor were not burdens, but were considered the heart of the community, a family that cared for them. This was utterly revolutionary. The church became a counterculture, a society within a society, built on a completely different set of values. People joined this community not by force or by government decree, but by conviction. They were drawn to a family where everyone was valued, where the last were first, and where love was the guiding principle. By the early 300s AD, something had fundamentally shifted. After centuries of grassroots growth and waves of persecution, Christians were everywhere. They were in the army, in the marketplace, in the civil service, and even in the emperor's household. Rome had tried to eliminate them, but it had failed. Then, in 313 AD, Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, officially legalizing Christianity and ending the persecution. But here is the key truth that is so often missed. Christianity had already conquered the hearts and minds of the empire before it ever gained legal protection or political power. Power followed growth, it did not create it. The Constantine shift was a recognition of a reality that had been building from the ground up for nearly 3 centuries. So, why does any of this still matter today? The story of the early church is a powerful testament to the spread of an idea not through power, but through conviction. Christianity spread because of a resurrection message that offered hope beyond the grave. It spread through ordinary people living on an extraordinary mission. It spread through a radical, sacrificial love that changed society from the inside out. It spread through a courageous faith that stood firm under persecution. It was truth lived, not just advertised. There were no algorithms, no influencers, no imperial decrees. There was just a faith that could not be silenced and a love that could not be contained, and history records the result.